To Guilfordian Reviews. I'm Nick Butinsky.
And I'm Mitchell Hamilton.
Today we'll be reviewing Insidious, Saw franchise creator James Wan's foray into haunting cinema. The movie stars Patrick Wilson, Rose Byrne, Ty Simpkins, and Lynn Shay.
It tells the story of a husband and wife named Josh and Renee, with 3 young children. After falling off a ladder while exploring the attic of the family's new house, one of their children, named Dalton, goes into a coma. Meanwhile, unexplained phenomena begin to occur surrounding the youngest child, causing Renee to become paranoid and frightened of what may be lurking in the house. 3 months later, the family moves in order to protect their mental well-being, but as they quickly find out, the haunting has followed them. Contacting an old friend familiar with ghostly going-ons, accompanied by your comic relief sidekicks, who are something out of a really bad Ghostbusters knockoff, Josh and Renee must face the demons that are terrorizing their family.
Ready to hear this yet? But unfortunately, I can't waste any time easing you into it. I want you to know this is what I believe, and it may contradict a previous medical diagnosis, but you called me here, and I'm taking that as an acceptance of my readings. Yes?
Go on.
Your son isn't in a coma. Falling off a ladder had nothing to do with this. His physical body is here, but his spiritual body is not. And the reason these disturbances, they followed you to a new home, is because it's not the house that's haunted. It's your son.
What sets Insidious apart from other haunting-based movies, aside from its unbearable audio soundtrack, is its concept of the further, a world alongside our own, which houses the spirits of the dead and apparently some demons as well. By indicating that astral projection can allow the living to enter this realm and interact with the spirits of those who have already passed on, Insidious opens up a whole second house full of equally creaky doors. Unfortunately, all of them lead to brick walls. The visuals within the further are creaky in themselves. They're dark, visually dark and dull. Instead of being unsettling or frightening, it's kind of boring. The demon that terrifies the audience throughout the first half of the film, the red-faced demon, is revealed to be a tiny Tim-loving creature, balding from the top of his horns to the very tiny bottoms of his cloven feet. Whatever thrills that the movie had built up over the first hour and 15 minutes are immediately knocked down by the less than intimidating conclusion, and the plot holes that sink anything that could have kept Insidious aloft.
Nick, you'll remember when you saw this. I walked out after the first 45 minutes. I mean, it was basically paranormal activity. It was a husband and a wife, some kids, and some weird voices and strange going on. It was so insanely dull. And then the red paw print that appears, spoilers, on the kid's bed. I couldn't do it, honestly. It killed me. I sat there and watched a woman play mediocrely on the piano and a bunch of children crying, which, swear to God, if you ever want to piss off an audience in a film, quicker than you ever can imagine, have crying children.
It's really particularly clear that the first third of the film is set to the tone of paranormal activity, much, I imagine, to the producer's suggestion. But it doesn't work for Insidious. The way that they shift tone about 45 minutes in towards first a normal haunting movie and then towards whatever it had aspired to be originally makes it divided and difficult to watch. But those first 45 minutes just come across as dull in comparison to the rest of the movie. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I jump easily. I'm a big fan of horror movies and am rarely scared by what I see on screen, but almost any unfocused face and shriek in the soundtrack will cause me to jump out of my seat. Still, though, I felt that the scares in Insidious just didn't live up to anything that they wanted to be.
It's probably
Without reinventing the horror tropes that have haunted house movies since the 50s, Insidious brings some genuinely fresh blood to the screen. Though it can't be said that the ingenuity is handled well, the attempt to rebundle astral projection into this format is appreciated by those who have seen Poltergeist too many times in film at this point. It's really only refreshing because the second act, the part that deals with the further and the astral, is really, It's really only refreshing because the second act, the part that deals with the further and the astral, was originally the basis for the film. The title, when it was still filming, was first the original title, while Insidious was still filming, was The Further, and the second title was The Astral. This was going to be a larger part in the film, but it seems that somewhere along, audiences didn't think that that was really going to carry the film.
And I can definitely see that point. And what I'm kind of bothered by is now this kind of regulated position that it takes towards, the second act and towards the beginning of the third act. It's just kind of shoehorned in. And like we were talking about it earlier, there's kind of really weird, surreal moments with the dancing dolls and all the weird stuff that happens in there that just kind of makes you scratch your head and go, what? Why is this here? It kind of confuses and doesn't really frighten, which, I mean, maybe was the point. Because, it's a parallel dimension sort of thing, and I see where they're going with that. But it just confounds me.
Instead of being uncanny, it's just perplexing.
Yeah.
The title, Insidious, as an adjective, can be defined as either proceeding in a gradual, subtle way, but with harmful effects, or treacherous and crafty. And I think we both agree, Insidious is neither one of those.
Neither.
In fact, the opening alone is like the least subtle introduction I've ever seen. There's something about just flashing the title of the movie and screaming.
Reel ever.
It was just, and then perfect silence for the rest of it. It had no relevance to the rest of the movie, and it was even more annoying at the end, after the less than thrilling conclusion, to once again be bombarded by noise and a title. Really, I could suggest going to see Insidious if you like the idea of horror movies, but you've never actually seen one.
And maybe if you liked Twin Peaks, the 90s television show, but like the really bad episodes.
If you like classic Are You Afraid of the Dark, now and not when you were a kid.
Man, I don't think there are many of those.
No, I don't think so either. Like, yeah, I can look back on it, enjoy it, but it's totally different now.
Yeah, what you see in the trailer and what you get in the movie are two very different things. So go in with, I'm not going to say lowered expectations, but take it with a grain of salt.
Also, if you like seeing Patrick Wilson pretend he was never a great actor.
Yeah.
As a horror fan, I can only give Insidious a 2 out of 5. I mean, I appreciate the fact that this isn't gore or torture porn. I mean, the scares don't come from making the audience cringe and imagine how painful something is. But instead, Insidious relies on equally cheap ploys to collect screams. Without really pushing the genre to any new limits or even rehashing already well-established tropes for horror movies, Insidious is just as formulaic as it is unentertaining. Just as formulaic, still, a slight entertainment value remains. Insidious won't keep you on the edge of your seat, but it can be passed as a rather average horror story in a sea of uncreepy creepypasta.
I think you're almost being too generous with the 2. I give it a 1.5. Only because I won't give it a 1 because nothing will ever be as bad as Sucker Punch to me.
I feel like that's
Yeah, that's the low bar. But I have the same problems, and it bothers me because I could hold this up as an example of why the horror genre is just in decline. And you were right with the gore and torture porn. That's the other side of this coin. So you either get unimaginative, sort of stale rehashing of old ideas, or you just get mindless gore and blood everywhere. And it bothers me that somewhere, I don't know, a decade, 2 decades ago, the idea of a really good psychological thriller horror film has just disappeared off the mainstream. And I think we're all for a loss.
I agree. And I'd like to think that the slight step forward in imagination that Insidious offers by allowing us to think about the further will help, but the poorly conceived and filmed notion of it really sets it back more than it progresses in any way.
Once again, another instance of good idea, poor execution.
Well, I hope you'll join us next week on Guilfordian Reviews.